This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
PowerStop already makes a great product. My job is just to make that product cool so that people want to buy it. Once people buy our product, almost 10 times out of 10, we've got a customer for life because we make something great.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back to another episode of Do It for a Living. I'm Todd Ersley with my Shop Assist, and today I've got with me Christopher Miller of PowerStop Brakes. I met Kris a couple years ago when he started getting involved with the Optima Ultimate Streetcar Challenge. So he's their company is one of the sponsors of that event. And then, so I see him at a lot of the events that I was going to. And then PowerStop is one of the sponsors of the Grid Life series as well. So when we had those guys on there, we talked about their company a little bit. And so, just a brief introduction of PowerStop. They've been around for many years doing a lot of OE replacement stuff, but they've made a push recently to get into the motorsport business. And so that's where Kris really has taken the reins of that section. So wanted to get him on the podcast to kind of hear his story and what they've been, what he's been doing with PowerStop Brakes. So Kris, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks again for coming on and, kind of giving us some insight into the company. So to get things started here, I just kind of wanted to hear, your personal background. Where did you grow up? What did you do as a kid? Kind of bring us up to the point when you started working at PowerStop.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, northwest suburbs in the 80s and the 90s. I've been, my family, my mom, my dad, and my stepfather have all been into cars. So I've pretty much been into cars since forever for me. Cars, trucks, Jeeps. I think the first vehicle I bought on my own was a very ratty CJ5 that as a natural born tinkerer, I tore apart and it never went back together. I did drive it a little bit before that. But yeah, generally that thing got torn apart, and I was going to I had a male Jeep also at the time with the sliding doors, and I had swapped over the firewall, was going to make it a left-hand drive, four-wheel drive male Jeep, and yeah, that project never got together. But moving from that, man, I've had many different cars and been into many different types of cars, just for as long as I can remember. There have been hot rods, muscle cars, European sports cars around the house, just as long as I can remember. So generally as a kid, there's cars, bicycles, computers, and just anything I could tinker with.
So did you stay in Chicago?
Yeah, I grew up there. That's where I went to college, and then I've moved away.
What was your major?
Aviation flight management at Lewis University, which is just south of, it's in Joliet.
And so is that, you were going to go into aerospace. Did you end up following that path for a little while?
I did not. I mean, I worked on the airport there for a little while, but it was never really my calling, I don't think. I got into it because the high school I went to, Mundelein High School, had a unique shop program. One of our teachers, Jim Jackson, was an airplane builder. He was an aviation A&P, skydiver, and a lot of things. And he brought the aviation program into the high school. So for my sophomore, junior, and senior years, I took an aviation class, whether it be Aviation 1, Aviation 2, or independent study aviation. And one of the things that came along with that was I could get credit hours towards, an aviation major at Lewis University. And I mean, Todd, they were so incredibly inexpensive that it didn't make sense not to. It was like
Okay.
$30 a credit hour towards my major. And that's kind of what pushed me towards aviation. Turned out not to be the right thing for me, but it kind of gave me a different perspective on just the way I worked on things and just life in general.
Did you end up getting your AMP license? Because that's aero. What does that stand for?
Airframe and power
Airframe
plant.
and power plant. Yeah. Did you end up getting that license to actually work on aircraft?
I did.
And so just never parlayed that into a mechanic job, huh?
No, never did. I did go straight from there to this little company called Fuel Management Systems, which is actually in Mundelein. I was racing radio-controlled cars at the time fairly competitively, and I met a father and son team at one of the local tracks. And after talking and talking, he ended up offering me a job. I had no real idea of what they did. The company was called Fuel Management Systems, and they did, as the name implies, they worked on fuel management. What I didn't realize when I walked in the door is that the original Holley, the 4DI, which was one of Holley's initial throttle body style fuel injection systems, they were actually built, and the computers were built right there at our warehouse. So I played with that for a while straight out of college. And then Barber Coleman is like a automation company, control systems company, bought Fuel Management Systems. And I ended up working with them they did automation systems. So generators that would, little diesel generators that would run, they would put like a positive charge on like oil field pipelines that they wouldn't rust, and running off of natural gas. Big V8s run off of natural gas. My first time playing with an engine dyno was actually there. We had a couple of water brake dynos, for the purpose of testing different fuel management things, or when we would adapt a vehicle or an engine from gasoline to natural gas, we would use that to, just to test power output, test viability. It was interesting. It wasn't wrenching. It wasn't mechanic work per se, but there was a lot of mechanic work involved. So, my experience in college and in working, just on my own stuff absolutely played into what I did there.
Very cool. And so what was your, what was the next step in your career process?
There've been a couple of jumps. So
You kind of bounced all over the place?
You have to bear with me. Yeah, I left there. That was when I started at AMS. It was Auto Motorsports at the time. So I was having my work, some hardcore work done on an Eagle Talon I owned by a company, TAD Motorsports in Illinois, and their head mechanic, Adam, had left them and was going to work for someone else. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll come by, and I started hanging out at this shop, and it was an office and a lift and some shop space, and hanging out and getting to know the guys. And this was Auto Motorsports, which would become AMS. And I hung out there long enough that they kind of needed some biz dev stuff, and they took me on as employee number 4. And then I spent the next 4 years helping AMS, kind of build their name and build the shop and build the brand.
Yeah, so coming on that early with, Martin.
Yeah, Martin and Arnie,
okay.
Collectively.
Yeah, so, coming on that early in the game, what was it like at AMS, right at the beginning of them starting that business?
Man, it was weird. I didn't think it was weird at the time, but looking back on it, it was just such a, I don't want to say a mom and pop feel. It was more of like a friends hanging out feel. We were doing fun things that weren't really mainstream yet. The import world was still very much growing. This is pre-Fast and Furious, of course. So this would have been 2001.
Okay.
It had a very friends feel. It was a lot of hanging out. There was, we we put in a lot of hours, but it didn't feel like work because it was fun. I was at the shop early every day and we stayed into the wee hours every day, just growing what it was. And then seeing the business grow from a shop and a retailer to a true parts manufacturer, and watching, I've said this before and I'll say it till the day I die, Martin was easily one of the smartest people I've ever worked for. Like watching him develop products and just the way his brain works was huge for me because it helped me kind of create a process to everything I do. And then, the business grew and it grew exponentially for a while. And then I left in 2005 and moved to Las Vegas.
Oh,
with a friend.
Okay. What brought that on?
I was, as a lot of people that work in shops, I was buying, building, and selling, buying, building, and selling. I was never sticking with a car. And work and my hobbies were starting to kind of blend together, and I started to get burned out. So I got rid of everything performance related, and I had a friend that moved to Las Vegas, and he was looking for a new house, out there, and I said, hey, find an extra room and I'll move out. It was just looking for a change. And then in Las Vegas, kind of got out of the car scene. I worked in the fitness industry. I worked in the finance industry. And that's when I kind of started getting back into working on other people's cars, at least.
Yeah, once you weren't doing it all day, every day, it kind of brought the passion back.
It absolutely did. And, burnout is something that I never thought. I mean, I was 21 to 25 years old when I worked at AMS, and I was invincible and never thought that I would ever get burned out, and cars were my life, and cars. And then one day it just like mentally was not where I was at anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, once I got away from it, stepped away, I had friends who had cars and I'd still go to events, but it took a little while to start working on other people's cars again. But then in Vegas, I did that, and there were a couple other moves in there. I moved to China for a little bit just to kind of get away. I had an opportunity to live there in Beijing for free for 6 months. So I kind of packed everything up and I moved there. And then, let's see, I moved back a couple of times.
Okay.
I did web development on the side, which kind of turned from a side hustle into a side main hustle. So I bounced back and forth between Chicago and Vegas a couple of times, still doing that kind of thing and a little bit of business development for online brands or online stores. Nobody really remarkable, but it paid the bills. It gave me freedom to kind of do what I wanted.
Was that like the mid 2000s?
Man, that would have been, I moved to China in Christmas of 2008. So I was there through most of 2009, and this would take me up to about 2011, 2012. I had a business partner at that time, and he wanted to start a company. He wanted to start an app development company, and he had just moved to Austin. So I moved to Austin. We started an app development company. We had a really great idea. We didn't execute. One of two things happened. We either didn't execute on it well enough at the time, or we were too early to the market. And the reason I say that is because this little app called Trivia Crack came out about 16 months later, which was, I don't want to say it was a copy of our app because it wasn't. It was the exact same concept as our app, and it became #1 in the App Store a little bit later. So I had a lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, aren't you mad about that? Like, absolutely not. I'm not, because you know what? In my opinion, we had a great idea and we were just a little too early to market. Mm-hmm. It just proved that I didn't have a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to like kind of look at it and say, well, somebody else was doing something similar, and just, timing and maybe marketing or product placement or something like that made a difference, but you guys were going down the right path, huh?
Absolutely. So right before South by Southwest, or at South by Southwest, we shut the company down. We ran out of funding, and we were bootstrapping it personally for 3 months, which can get expensive. We had a really, really great development team, our art team, and good developers aren't cheap.
Mm-mm.
So at some point, we just had to decide to stop burning money. I hung out in Austin for the rest of that year. I had some good friends there that, gave me opportunities to just kind of bounce around and do what I wanted and hang out and take some time away. And then my closest friend in Chicago, who's a photographer as well. I'm also a photographer. I forgot to mention that. Been doing that for a long time. He wanted to officially start a photography business in Chicago. So I moved back to Chicago, and that's where I was introduced to PowerStop chronologically.
Okay. So it sounds like you just kind of find an opportunity and take it. There's no real like congruent path to your activities in life.
There really isn't. People ask me like, at 27, 28 years old, why did you move to China? Why would you do that? And I said, why not? I had nothing tying me down. And all of these experiences, they all add up to something. They're worth more than the sum of their parts. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what took me, on my path, my non-traditional path. But that did bring me to PowerStop in the end, which turned out to be a pretty good move. We shot PowerStop's catalog for a little while, and at some point, our contact over there and my friend, Rodian, he mentioned to me that they wanted to, start building their social media platform and become more involved in that. And he knew that I had the company in Austin, and he was interested in, my take on it. So I kind of laid out a path and, said this is how I would do it and this and that. And he just flat out asked me, he was like, well, would you just like the job doing that? And that was my segue into PowerStop. It took me just over a month to say yes, because it had been a very long time since I'd worked for someone else. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I said I would never do again. I've heard a lot of people on this podcast say that, corporate world just didn't fit them and that they don't think they could ever work for someone again. I was in that same position. But PowerStop was in a serious period of growth. Even as a contractor working in the facility, our photo area would get moved around constantly because they were just adding more racking and more SKUs and more parts and more stock. And I looked at the opportunity and I said, this is a company that's growing and growing quickly. And I think I'd like to take another shot at the corporate world. Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to dive a little bit into your kind of thought process with doing different activities. It sounds like I hear airplane or, car mechanic or airplane mechanic, and then kind of car stuff, and then marketing, and then photography and web design and app development. So like, people management, stuff like that. What kind of goes through your head when you're faced with a new activity? Do you just dive into it and that's all that you think about? Web development, for instance, did you take any training, or did you just start like building a website for yourself and then market that to somebody else? And, same with photography. Did you get an opportunity to start taking pictures, or did you just pick up a camera one day and start messing with stuff?
All of that kind of goes back to my hobbies in high school. My hobbies quite literally were cars. I rode bicycles for a while. I was really into computers. I was, fortunate enough that my parents saw that I liked to tinker with them and bought me a computer, and I tinkered with it. I just kind of taught myself. Photography was my other passion in high school that I might have omitted. I took, I want to say 12 semesters of photography in high school. Film photography. This is before digital. So I had a passion for photography for a long time, and just general tinkering. If there was something I got into, I generally do dive in headfirst. It's a blessing and a curse. I get really into things, and it takes up a lot of time sometimes, and sometimes it's not the wisest decision. And it has kept me bouncing from one thing to another, but it's also given me the opportunity to not just look at things from the 30,000 foot view, but really to dive in. And some of them have been a waste of money and a waste of time, but I've learned that that's something I really don't like. I've also found my passions that way, by diving headfirst into things.
Yeah, if you don't like doing it for 14 or 16 hours a day, it's probably not something you should be doing on the side.
Absolutely. And like I said, some of these things have cost me a lot of time and money diving into things like technology. You spend a ton of money on the latest, greatest thing to get into it, and then 6 months later, it's not worth anything. Drones were another thing. Drone photography, drone videography, racing drones are something I got into 7 years ago. I didn't realize how deep I was into it until I moved to Texas recently, and I had to cull the herd with my hobbies. And I looked at these boxes and boxes of parts, and I was like, what did I do?
How did it get this bad? You hoarded all this stuff.
How did it get this bad? And it was, I was building drones before you could buy them, in a box. And I just started looking through, and I was like, man, flight controller, speed controllers, batteries, chargers, airframes, propellers of different pitches and sizes. And at some point, the consumer, the prosumer drone market caught up to what the hobbyists and the tinkerers were doing.
They kind of killed it, huh?
And I don't want to say that they killed it, but they made it so much more hardcore at that hobby level. So the guys who are tinkering, who are building their own stuff, they're building drones to do things that consumer drones can't do because they're very niche, like extremely long distance flights. I mean, there's guys flying 40, 50 miles each direction at this point and returning back home. It's insane what they're doing, but it's very niche. That said, they are driving the prosumer market. All of that stuff that they're doing in the forums and online and in groups, companies like DJI, they look at where the trends are, and they look at how other people have kind of done the research, and then they refine it and make it something that you can buy in a box. I've been so impressed with where drones have gone in the last 3 years. The consumer drone market is insane, and drone photography market is insane. Like I said, that's another thing I dove headfirst into, and I'm still pretty into them, but it was something that wasn't my path, we'll say.
Yeah.
Just another stop on the roller coaster ride that has been my life and professional career.
So, kind of wanted to focus in on kind of the business side. I'm curious about the app development business that you had, and this is kind of a negative leaning question, but what were the factors that, made you realize that this isn't going to work, I need to shut it down, versus just like getting down to it and just making it work? Because, we see in the automotive industry, shops come and go, and, sometimes no amount of hard work is going to make it be successful. What really made you guys think like, man, like this just isn't going to work anymore? And what did you do to kind of shutter the business? And then how did you mentally and emotionally move on from that point?
Man, as far as new businesses go and as young businesses go, there's always one point of contention: money. And app development, the physical development was over my head. It was programming that I could not teach myself to do in the time that we needed. So we had to have a team. And like I said, it was expensive to have a team, and we were trying to develop at a very, very fast pace. and we literally just ran out of money. And like I said, we bootstrapped that company at it was $38,000 a month to run the development team, artists, developing for Android and iOS, testing, an office, and we ran out of money quicker than expected, which was 100% our fault.
Yes.
And
The runway is never as long as you think it is when you're looking at it.
It literally isn't. And then once you get behind the gun, I wasn't good enough at fundraising, and I didn't reach out for help from other people fundraising soon enough. We got to the point where there was money somewhere on the horizon, but so far off that I had a head developer who had a family. I had the rest of our development team was younger, but they were out of college, they had bills to pay, and I had to make the decision, of I need to pay bills, my business partner needs to pay bills, the company had bills to pay, and I couldn't, without an actual date of getting money on the horizon, I couldn't lie to our team. I couldn't say, hey, the money's there, it's going to be there. And at one point I just said, you know what, we have to shutter this. Like this can't go on. I can't morally, for lack of a better term, string these guys along because I have a dream,
Yeah.
and because I want to make something work. I was emotionally too far into it and too in love with the project, which is consistently an issue. But, we shuttered it. It was hard at first, emotionally. There's a lot that goes through your head, selling off equipment, trying to make sure that we didn't have any debtors outside of our employees. So trying to make sure that we took care of them, to the best of our ability. All of them have gone on to really, really good things. In Austin at the time, it was still a huge period of growth. I'm happy to say that I've seen everybody from that company has gone on to very successful careers in their, respective industries.
It's never fun to close a business and you just have to we gave it a shot. It didn't work out. Move on to the next thing and, just put that behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, I was lucky enough to have some good friends in Austin that kind of gave me a release. I'm also really into wake surfing and boats. I love boats. Powered, sail, doesn't matter. And I love wake surfing. I was lucky enough to have a friend who had a boat, who liked owning a boat, liked going out on a boat, didn't like maintaining it, and didn't like driving it.
Okay. Just like experiencing the water, huh?
Correct. And he had the boat on a dock on Lake Austin. So, I'm fortunate enough that he, I had the keys to the kingdom as far as that went. And I spent a lot of days pulling that boat off the dock, floating it in the middle of Lake Austin, and just laying on it and thinking. It was, kind of a retreat. And that was, as far as like my mental health went, that was a huge component. Had I not had that opportunity, had I had to jump back into something, I'm sure that whatever I jumped back into would have been a disaster. So I got through that, and then the opportunity to work with, my closest friend in Chicago came up, and it was in an industry that I like, working with people I like, in photography. So I just kind of jumped to it. And that was just kind of my jump back into reality.
Well, man, yeah, that's a pretty wild ride that you've had over the, growing up and going through all that. So let's take a real quick break here. And then when we come back, we'll hear about, your position and, what PowerStop is doing.
We all know owning a shop is difficult, so we created My Shop Assist to help you manage the various jobs. Whether you run a machine shop, a performance tuning shop, build off-road trucks, or even do powder coating, My Shop Assist can help you. It is completely online and will help you schedule the jobs, log time on each task, track parts orders, and take pictures of the work. You can even export your jobs from My Shop Assist into QuickBooks as invoices. So if you're interested to improve operations at your shop, check out myshopassist.com to start your 30-day free trial.
Okay, so we're back with Kris of PowerStop Brakes, and getting into kind of the business side of it. You told us that you were working, you're doing with your buddy, doing photography stuff, and that kind of used that to get a position at PowerStop. So, what did they hire? Well, like, what was your official title when they hired you on, and what did they want you to do there?
I was hired on as a social media manager.
And
And
did they have social media at the time?
they did. Our Facebook following when I started on, if I remember correctly, it was like 2,480 likes on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
We're creeping up on 200,000 right now. So it's been a ride.
Mm-hmm. And what time frame was it that you were brought in?
Oh, geez, it's almost 3 years.
Okay, so like 2015, early 2015, maybe?
Yeah, it was May of 2015.
Okay.
I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary right now. And I was brought on as social media manager and content creator. So my job was quite literally growing our social and creating and curating content for it.
Okay.
Videos, photos, articles for our website, tech, and just kind of beginning to weave the web of online presence that they wanted.
Getting into that, how big is PowerStop? Because I know we had spoken before, and I was like, man, being in the racing side, I hear of names, like Willwood or Hawk or Brembo or something, and it never really. PowerStop wasn't one that I was familiar with. And then you kind of explained, that it's a big company. And so just kind of take us into some information about, what they were doing when you first came on, and then maybe, how you've helped them kind of shift gears or add new markets for them.
So whenever people are like, PowerStop, man, I've never heard of them. And I say, my joke was that we are the largest brake company you've never heard of. We were when I joined, and we still are the best-selling brand of brakes online. The company, man. So this is part of that growth. When I was working there as a photographer, our address originally was Suite C, which was over 100,000 square feet, but not much. Of our address, and then they knocked out one wall and we took over Suite B, and now we have the whole building, plus we have another building.
Jeez.
So I believe we have right around 500,000 square feet, mostly warehouse space. We have our new facility is where we moved our caliper division to. So to kind of break down what PowerStop does and what we sell, we specialize in OE fit performance upgrade kits. Mm-hmm. That's how PowerStop made their name. As I'm to understand it, PowerStop as a brand has existed for much longer than the current entity. But our 3 original owners got together, they bought the brand, and they just kind of saw a hole in the market for something high quality that wasn't high priced. Without going too deep into it, they put everything on the line. I know at least 2 of the owners had mortgaged their houses to make major purchases in the company, which is, as I spend more time in business, I find more and more people doing that to make the next big step. And it worked out pretty well. So PowerStop is probably, man, we grow so fast. I want to say we're around 300 employees right now.
Okay.
And let's say 250 of those roughly are probably warehouse, and the other 50 are admin of some sort, mm-hmm. In an office.
So were they brake guys when they started the business, or were they enthusiasts that were like, this product is not offered and we need to make it?
They were all automotive parts guys.
Okay.
So salespeople for other teams, or like manufacturers reps that kind of thing that got together and built the company. Arvin, our CEO, grew up working at a parts counter in Chicago. And once again, this is as far as I'm to understand. Everybody's kind of had their fingers in the industry from like a parts counter or brand rep or salesperson standpoint, and they all came together to create this company.
Okay. And saying that they're like the biggest aftermarket, does that mean that, you go to AutoZone and you want brakes, they're one of the manufacturers?
No.
Okay.
We're more of an online. We have traditionally been more of an online brand, and I say have been because we are in AutoZone, we are in O'Reilly's, we are in Advanced. We are not their their big push forward currently, but we do work with all of them. We work with Pep Boys, but mostly it was an online brand.
Okay. So were they distributing the product themselves, or were they selling it to Jags or Summit or something like that?
We work on a WD and a B2B business, so we do not sell to the public, generally speaking. Jags, Summit, Rock Auto, Amazon sells our parts, and then all of the major WDs. So if you own a shop, you can purchase our products through a Keystone or a
like Turn 14 or Motivacity.
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
correct. That's where most of our business comes from. And then we do also we white label or we manufacture for other companies as well. Major automotive repair chains that have their own brand. A lot of times they don't make those. They're purchasing through another company like PowerStop, where we manufacture, warehouse, package, and ship to them. But from the PowerStop brand standpoint, we specialize in brake kits. And I want to say in 2009, 2010, we were one of the first companies, if not the first company, to package rotors, pads, hardware, and lube in a box under one SKU. Instead of purchasing, your rotors here and your pads there and having to make these decisions, PowerStop took it upon themselves to say, hey, this is the kit. This is everything you need in one box to do a brake job.
Yeah, makes it very, very easy for the consumer to make a decision at that point.
Absolutely. And the DIY customer that may be good with their hands but doesn't sit on the forums reading what's the best or what works with what, it was a recipe for success. That's where PowerStop really found their growth, and brake kits are still our focus and our number one selling product.
I want to transition into the motorsport side. From my understanding, that's been kind of a project, a pet of yours for the past couple of years. Were they big into the motorsport section, or is this something that's kind of new, or did you take something that was, existing and kind of maybe not growing or not, sustaining itself very well and make it into what it is today?
It was all magical timing. I joined PowerStop, officially signed the paperwork, and then I went on a vacation. I was like, okay, I can start at this date. So I went to Austin. I was hanging out with friends, and I happened to have all of my camera gear with me. And they said, hey, can you start tomorrow? I was like, yeah, I don't see why not. They're like, okay, buy a ticket to Arizona, come to the Bondurant Racing School. We were in the process of developing what was track day at that point, and I knew very little of it, having been just an outside contractor, and this was like I was diving in head first. So I walked in. My very first official day on the job was at Bondurant shooting media of the testing process, and we had our product team out there, myself, my boss Rodian. We're all out there documenting the process of building this new product. And that was how I was introduced to it. It just so happened that I learned once I was there, that as far as motorsports goes, I was like one of two people in the company that was really into motorsports. I was the only person in the company who had really raced anything, with any sort of success.
Okay.
And I kind of picked the project up as a side thing. I was like, oh yeah, I can help, develop a SKU list or develop a product strategy. And that's where I started wearing a second hat. I wear a lot of hats at PowerStop. I don't know how many of them we can get into, but I wear a lot of them there. My current email signature says brand manager / social media / motorsports.
Okay. Yeah.
It should also say /events / motorsports relationships / sponsorships. I just started picking up pieces where I fit. Social media was taking a lot of my time, but I saw that to grow this part of the business, we were going to need a strong social media aspect, and I could be a part of that development as well. And I just kind of picked it up. When I walked into the team, I think there was about 8 months of testing on the track day product. And that testing included buying every other product on the market, testing it, figuring out what we or what the team liked, and then developing what we thought would be the best of everything that we could put into one pad.
That to me seems like a huge undertaking. You're going up against juggernauts in the industry that have been making performance products for, I don't know, decades. It's like
we are,
and that seems like quite daunting to try to step into that market, especially with the size of it. If you're a large aftermarket OE replacement, the enthusiast side of the track day guys is very minimal. It's from a numbers
tiny.
Standpoint.
It was I can't divulge exact sales numbers, but I can tell you that track day by volume and by dollars accounts for less than 1% of our annual sales. So you are 100% correct. It is a tiny component of what we do, but it provides a halo effect for everything else we do. It bolsters the brand. So yes, it was a major undertaking. We had a couple of advantages going for us. We were not trying to create a race pad necessarily to compete with some of those other products. Companies like Hawk and Carbotech, now G-Lock, Performance Friction, they all make really great products. Raybestos. We wouldn't have gone to test their products if they weren't industry leaders. My opinion is that a lot of that development has been stale for many years, though. The pads we'll use Hawk as an example. The pads that people have been using, people continue using because they like them, and I think that Hawk sees that, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But once again, they were developing a product for the track, so things like noise isn't the biggest concern for their products because they're not sugarcoating it. It is a pure performance product that is meant to work on a track. It's not supposed to be quiet. It's not supposed to be low dust. It has a heat range that starts a little bit higher than you would want on the street. These are all characteristics of racing parts, and they're very good at that. But we saw a hole in the market where there wasn't kind of a bridge product between street and full-on race. You go to a track day, and everybody's daily driver Evos and S2000s and Corvettes sound like they have bottle rockets going off in the fenders, and they're embarrassed to drive those parts home. They're one of two things. They're either embarrassed
or they're proud of it.
Or they're proud of it. Exactly. They're like, yeah, these are race car parts, I don't care if you don't like the noise. So we kind of saw a gap in the middle for a product for a track day enthusiast, someone who wanted to take their factory braking system to the next level and may not be ready to go to a full race pad or to a big brake kit. We just kind of saw that gap in the market, and that's where from a marketing and from a or a product strategy standpoint, that's kind of where I helped take the reins. I don't want to say I took the reins because there's a team of us that have done this. This is not me. I just happen to be the face of it. I'm the one that everybody sees at events. We just kind of as a team, like, hey, this is a hole in the market. Let's grow it. And that's where we kind of entered motorsports. We were lucky enough at the time to be developing the product on a C6 Z06, and the Bondurant school was having problems with another product that we were able to fix. That was kind of our segue into the school. And the product that we were also developing just happened to be the perfect product for what they need. So since late 2014, early 2015, all vehicles at the Bondurant Racing School, all of the school cars have been equipped with our track day compound.
Yeah, and that's no simple feat. They're dogging on those cars. I mean, it's mostly newer people. It's not professional race car drivers unless the instructors get in them. But I mean, they're wheeling around big, heavy. That's what we even talked about that when I interviewed them for the podcast. It was like they're doing Dodge Chargers and the Demons, and those are not light cars. So they're putting it through its paces. If they can last a full day in the Arizona summer on a set of pads. And I mean, it's always been my experience that even the less experienced drivers actually are harder on pads because they just modulate them and don't push hard enough for a short period of time. They just like sit on them for a long period of time. So, I mean, It does speak volumes to the product in its ability to perform that you've got, something like that they've got dozens of vehicles running them all day, every day.
Absolutely. And once again, we're still not a big name. As you had alluded to earlier, we do sponsor Grid Life, and as part of our sponsorship last year is we sponsored the Time Attack series, and the prize at the end of the year to each category, so street mod, track mod, and unlimited, those 4 winners all got to go to Bondurant with me about a month ago now. And these are not slow guys. I mean, Tony Fuentes, exceptionally fast, established racer. James Houghton, Canadian, drives the Time Attack Type R. I mean, these are guys who drive. Graham Gaylord and Charles Miller. These are guys who are very fast, and every one of them got out there and said, we cannot believe that these pads take this abuse, and the pads never ever let go in those Hellcats. And believe me, they tried. We had one of them blow a seal out of a caliper, and another one boil fluid. But the pads were never the issue, and they were all very, very impressed. They're like, we had no idea that you created a product, that you guys built a product that can take this abuse, and that is just this good. It has this good of a feel. It was a total shock to them, and that's my life. Usually, me introducing someone to the product and them being fairly blown away, as long as they understand the context of the product. I tell people flat out that if they are building a full-on race car, it's on slicks, it's got a lot of horsepower, it's got a lot of aero, the track day pad may not be the right pad for you. It's not a full race pad. But for the guy that's taking his car to the track and maybe doesn't want to change the pads on the way home, I really think that we have created a product that is unlike anything else on the market. And I'm super, super proud to have been a part of that process. Not to mention the fact that it's afforded me a pretty cool job.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What other events? I mean, I've been part of a bunch of them. You've really taken the marketing side and ran with it. So you do huge sponsorship with Grid Life, and then the present of Bondurant is really cool. hopefully you guys will keep doing something like that, and then I need to find a way to get and do more of those events.
Yeah.
What other big ones are you part of now? So like starting off just in the motorsports side.
On the motorsports side, so the established ones that we've been a part of are the Optima Ultimate Streetcar Series. We sponsor the Speed Stop component of that, and that's been a really awesome relationship, not only with the company but with the racers. And I akin Grid Life and Optima to two very similar siblings in that they both have their own community inside, and they're very community oriented, each one of them. So we sponsor those. There's Bondurant, the newest one, one of my personal favorites and one of my pet projects has been Spec Corvette out in California. And I know that you spoke recently with John Nguyen.
Oh yeah. We just had him on, and that was super cool. I'm enthusiastic about that big time.
I tell you what, when we were already sponsoring him as a driver at Optima, I met him through another friend that we sponsored, and it was just, we clicked. He and I clicked just naturally. So I was helping him out with brakes on his car. He was going to events. He put our name on the car, and then he came to me and said, "Hey, we have this idea." And when he told me about Spec Corvette, like, I was so incredibly excited for it. And like you, I'm excited for it to make its way east, because it takes all of the cool parts of Spec Miata, which is an incredible series and a lot of fun to race, and it adds horsepower to it, which makes everything more fun.
Yeah.
And it is cheaper now currently to build a competitive Spec Corvette than it is to build a competitive Spec Miata. Spec Miata, it's just, if you want to be truly competitive and you want to race a lot of races at the national level, you're basically driving a $60,000 stock Miata. It's just, it's the reality of it.
Yeah, it's just gotten so serious that's what it takes now. But you get in an event in its infancy, and it hasn't gotten that way yet.
Yeah, it blows me away that for $20,000 and some sweat equity, you can be on a level playing field, vehicle-wise, with guys like Jake Roselle, who's a friend of both of ours, exceptionally fast driver, very young driver. He's got a future. But to be able to sit on a level playing field with him, at the track, and to be able to drive with guys, I'm super excited on the motorsports side with Spec Corvette. I will personally have more involvement in that in the future, be it driving or building a car or something. I intend to get into it. If it means a couple of flights to California a year, I'll be making them.
Yeah, that's very cool. So we have been focusing pretty much this entire show on the motorsport side, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us the off-road side. And so when I saw you at SEMA last year, you guys had your Jeep in the booth, and that seems to be a huge market. We just had I had one of the founders of Painless Performance Products, the wiring company, and he was just going on and on about the off-road market and how that has taken off. And, even visiting off-road truck shops and having them as customers for our software, I see, that industry getting a much larger. And so kind of take us through, that aspect as well, because that's a performance side. And it looks like you guys are making, that's what I see you mostly doing, is off-road truck stuff and Jeep stuff. So can you talk briefly about that industry as well, that market?
PowerStop, just to kind of break it down to the basics, our general ethos is that, we're problem solvers. We put all of the parts of a brake job into a kit. Brake dust is an issue. Our carbon fiber ceramic pads fix that. Additional performance, the carbon fiber in our pads fixes that. And when you're selling a performance product to a muscle car guy and say a Jeep guy, you're really selling them the same benefits. Muscle cars are fast and they need more braking. Jeeps may not be fast, but they've got all these heavy parts in them and they need more braking. And this is another place where my personal passions kind of took over and have been driving what I've been doing. So we make a truck and tow brake kit across the market. It's our Z36 Extreme Truck and Tow. And it does the same thing for Jeeps as what our Z26 pad and kit does for muscle car guys. We just saw a problem and we're trying to fix it. I kind of spearheaded at least the marketing side of that, and a little bit of trying to push product development into, the Jeep market is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Jeeps are very hot right now, especially with new chassis coming out. And we noticed, I look at our web traffic online and I can see where the trends are by who's referring to our website. I can see where people are talking about us.
Mm-hmm.
And we just saw that the off-road industry was blowing up. We were getting more and more traffic to our off-road products, and we saw an opportunity to build more marketing around it and to become more involved in the community, which is where like the Jeep comes in. So we do run an event of our own called the Trail. So far, we've only gone to SEMA on the Trail. So it has been called the Trail to SEMA, where we take an 11-day off-road trip from Chicago to Las Vegas right before the SEMA show, just to get out there and be a part of the community. I don't know, our off-road program isn't nearly as intense as our motorsports program. All of the pieces were already there when I joined. Mm-hmm. It was just a matter of getting them in front of people, which is actually, you're speaking to me now. I'm in Florida, leaving for Jeep Beach from Tampa to Daytona tomorrow, where I'm going to spend, just short of a week doing nothing but talking to people that are enthusiasts in the off-road industry, seeing what they like, what they need, how we can help, and maybe that'll help us develop new products. We do have a new JK Wrangler product coming out. I don't know the exact schedule, so I can't say too much about it, but there's some pretty big things coming for JK owners this year, hopefully. And yeah, like you said, Jeeps are one of my passions. I do daily drive the Jeep that's in most of our ads on 40-inch tires. I drive it every day. I drove it here to put it in the vendor show. It's a passion of mine, but we're really trying to just lead the industry in bolt-on performance. So whether it be for a muscle car or for your daily driver or for a Jeep or one of our newer products, Eurostop, we saw that there was a lot of high-end European cars that were coming into the secondary market, and one of the problems with vehicles like that is maintenance is insanely expensive. Mm-hmm. We saw a problem, we saw something we could fix, and we stepped in with the Eurostop product. So now we have a product that, let's say you have an AMG Mercedes. It came from the factory with very specific brake components that do a very specific job on that vehicle. There's things that people don't consider, like carbon content of rotors. A lot of those vehicles, to keep the brakes quiet, they require things like high carbon. And without getting too crazy technical, one of the biggest things we deal with in brakes is pad resonance or squeaking. Basically, everything resonates in a brake system. It's just a matter of what frequency it resonates at. And by changing the components, you can move that resonance up or down or make it, to the human ear, disappear. European cars are kind of difficult to do that with. They have very large pad area, and the larger the surface area between the pad and the rotor, the more room for resonance you have. So our Eurostop product is, a specially tailored product just for those. So it's rotors that are comparable to what came on the vehicle from the factory. And it's a pad that is not only the right pad for the vehicle, but it's also ECE R90 regulated or standardized. So it passes the exact same regulations that it would have to in Europe where the vehicles were built, where they have much stricter rules on braking components. And aftermarket components in general in Europe are much, especially on the safety side, they're regulated much more aggressively for things like noise, compressibility, overall friction. Part of the R90 standard is your noise, your compressibility, and your friction can't vary from what the factory offered more than a certain percentage. So for the guys who want to get a ton more braking, that product may not be R90 approved because it falls outside of what in the European industry they consider the ideal setup. They look at a company like Mercedes that puts $1 billion into research and development, and they say, hey, they spent all that money, they probably got it right, so we want everything that goes onto that vehicle to stick to, for the most part, those standards. And our brake kit, the Eurostop brake kit, kind of coming back to it, is the only kit on the market in the US right now that uses all ECE R90 equivalent components at a fraction of the cost of going to the dealership.
Man, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, I did not know that they had those sorts of regulations and stuff out there, but I guess it makes sense. They do like those.
Yeah. Europe is just just a completely different ball game. And European cars are built to that standard, so we figured why not build a brake kit to that standard? And that's been taking off like really, really successfully. Super proud of that product.
It sounds to me like, you've been given the opportunity to raise brand awareness with a company that is already very large. That's something that I hadn't really encountered, mostly for brand awareness stuff. It's something like what we deal with the software is like, nobody knows we exist because we're small, and we haven't been around for that long, but it sounds like quite a fun adventure when you're given the freedom and the ability to, raise this awareness for a product and a company that is large, so that you can use that and you say, hey, we'll get this motorsport side, or we'll get this off-road truck side, and then we'll get, the intent there is to get people to use it on their daily drivers or their weekend track car or something like that. And that sounds like it's just been a really fun and interesting adventure that they've given you lots of autonomy and freedom to do. Is that kind of how you see it as well?
They have, and there's a lot of times, where I'll go to my boss or I'll go to Arvin, our CEO, I'll have an idea, and we will butt heads on it in a very creative fashion, though. Like, there's always something good that comes out of it. And a lot of times I have to remind him, I'm like, hey, PowerStop already makes a great product. My job is just to make that product cool so that people want to buy it. Mm-hmm. Once people buy our product, almost 10 times out of 10, we've got a customer for life because we make something great. But like you said, I'm in the position where it's already a large company that nobody knows about, and I'm just trying to teach people about the company, and they have given me a ton of autonomy. I had trouble moving back into the corporate world, and PowerStop doesn't feel corporate at all. They've given me the tools and the guidance to do my job correctly without stepping on the things that I do. And most importantly, with believing in, hey, he says he can do this, he should be doing it.
Yeah, they trust you with that responsibility.
They do. It's been a wild ride. I wear a lot of hats. Yeah. Sometimes I work late hours. I do travel a lot this time of year. I'm starting to come into my busy season for traveling, and that can weigh on you a little bit, but it's all for the greater good. And like I said, I have a pretty cool job, all things considered.
Yeah, when it allows you to, live off-site, and your headquarters is a motorcycle / coffee shop in a cool part of Dallas. That's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, you do know me too well. Shout out to Locomoto for giving me and for dealing with me every day, because I do sit there and I do take work calls. There's no cooler spot in Dallas to work at. Yeah,
it is a nice spot. I'm probably going to go head out there today. I got my motorcycle running again last night. It ended up just being a loose ground wire. So I got it running and it started it up, and I'm like, I got to ride this thing. The weather's getting so nice. So I'll probably I'll probably put all my gear on and head down there later today because it's going to be a beautiful 80-degree spring day. So I'll go check out the guys at Local Moto and have some coffee and hang out for a little bit.
See, and here you have me wanting to dive headfirst into another hobby that I've picked up and gotten rid of, but hanging around the motorcycle shop all the time and having friends that ride. Now I feel like I need another motorcycle, which is I'm currently on the personal side of things. I am about to start building an Ultra 4 race truck.
Okay.
On the off-road side, so I don't need any more hobbies. But I can bend the rules here and there.
Yeah, motorcycles are inexpensive, so you can pick one of those up for like a set of tires for your truck.
Oh yeah, yes, that's. I could pick about 5 motorcycles for the cost of the tires on a race truck.
So, just kind of, I want to hear maybe your thoughts on kind of the future of the business. Where do you foresee, what is your work going into for the next few years at PowerStop? Are you going to jump into a different market? Or are you going to try to, expand the business, on the enthusiast side? What are kind of the goals of the company over the next couple of years?
There is much more enthusiast level products coming. We do have, we don't really play in the big brake space much, if at all, with the exception of OE upfit. So like Toyota Tacoma guys can very easily put Tundra 4-piston brakes on the front of their vehicles. 350Z drivers with a simple bracket can run a caliper, rotor, and pad from a 370 with the Akebono Sport brakes. We're starting to get more into that market of giving people the tools all in one box to upfit to
Interesting.
Something that is an OE upgrade.
Yeah, I've seen marketed the CTSV brake kit for some Subaru model.
For literally everything.
Yeah, I guess because they made so many of those that Brembo caliper is inexpensive.
Yeah, that pad shape that you're talking about is the 1001 pad shape, is fairly ubiquitous in Brembo calipers of those years. Challenger SRTs, Camaros, Corvettes, CTSV, Evo, STI, 350Z with the Brembo, the Trek setup. I want to say Genesis with the Trek setup on it, or the Sport brakes. I mean, that pad shape is
everywhere
throughout the industry. It's everywhere. So yeah, and that's something that we're just looking to get more into. Is we already make all of these great OE fit parts, but for the guy who, and this is another great opportunity in the resale market, you can buy a 350Z. For as much as I personally don't like the way they look, there is nearly no better performance value right now than first generation 350Zs. You can pick these cars up for $3,500. They make power, they handle, they drift, and the aftermarket's huge for them. So, to go pick up a base model stick shift 350Z and then to be able to bolt on the performance of the newer version of that car at a very minimal cost, it's very enticing to people. And once again, it's that middle ground where we're not going to compete with Brembo or Stop Tech or Willwood on big brake kits. That's not our business. But there are guys who want more performance that just don't have the money for that, maybe, or maybe they have the money but they aren't ready to make that kind of a commitment. And this is where OE upfit, it fills a gap. It fixes a problem, and that's what we do. We're problem solvers.
Just kind of closing this out here. One of the questions I always like to ask people, you mentioned one of your daily driver vehicles, but you really, that stretched lifted Jeep that you've got is pretty wild. What is your daily driver car when you're kind of putzing around Dallas?
I have a couple of them, but the one that I appreciate driving the most is I have a 1974 Baja Bug.
Okay.
It doesn't make a lot of horsepower, but it is a smiles per mile kind of car.
Uh-huh.
It's, got the Baja body kit, which is fenders, a hood, like a little rear engine cover. It's got 2 bumpers, front and rear. It's got off-road tires. It's not fast. It's loud. It doesn't have a radio. It's a very visceral driving experience, albeit not the fastest driving experience. But
it's an interesting driving experience.
I gotta say, I love driving that car. It's very hard to get out of that car and not have a smile on your face.
Uh-huh.
It's just a fun car to drive, and everybody likes it. I have never met somebody who was like, "Oh man, Baja Bug, what a horrible car." They all look at it, they're like, "Oh man, thing's so cool." And I could go into all of its shortcomings when they say that, because yes, it is a cool car. It's also loud and doesn't have heat. It does have very nice seats though. It does have heated seats.
Oh,
but,
that's your heater then, huh?
Yes, my heater is a set of Recaro seats that triple the value of the car.
Yeah, when you sell the car, you're really just selling seats that are attached to something, huh?
Yeah, I'm selling seats and a stack dash that's in there. That's really what I'm selling, with a car attached to it.
That's fun. That's very cool. How do people get connected with you and the website if they want to find out more information?
Our website is simple. It's PowerStop.com. We are PowerStop Brakes on Instagram, PowerStopMedia on YouTube, PowerStop Brakes on Facebook, and PowerStop Brakes on Pinterest.
Okay. So if you want to do some crafting, you can look at Pinterest, huh?
I had the exact same opinion until I talked with, I work a lot, not only in Ultimate Street Car, but just in like marketing life. Mm-hmm. Jim McElvain, who I believe you've also had on the podcast, and we chit chat a lot because we do the same job just for different companies. And Pinterest drives a lot of traffic.
Man, that super surprises me.
And when I say a lot of traffic, I mean enough traffic to like put you over the tipping point. And you just got to consider this. Every time you do a Google image search, I would say every time I do a Google image search, at least 1 out of every 15 photos that I click on is a photo from Pinterest. So from a visual standpoint and from a photo standpoint, there's very few tools right now that are as unregulated and unalgorithmed.
That's very true.
As Pinterest right now.
Yeah, I mean that is true. I've never thought about it that way, because you're not gonna get Facebook photos, you're not gonna get Instagram photos, but Pinterest is gonna tag it with your company name.
And with anything you tag it with.
Yep.
Their metadata is actually really strong just in their descriptions. So for anybody out there that's looking to market their automotive business, kind of like a third-tier marketing, very, very hands-off, get a Pinterest account. Set it up. Make sure that your descriptions are good and that you're using proper tags. You'd be fairly surprised how quickly it ramps up.
Yeah.
You can go from a new account to doing 10,000 impressions a day in probably 2 months. It's ridiculous. And you don't have to spend a dime.
That's excellent advice. So get a Pinterest account, huh?
Yeah, it's not Pinterest. It's not just for crafters anymore.
Well, on that note, I guess we'll be done here. So again, thanks, Kris, for coming on the episode and telling us about PowerStop and what you've got going on there.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests. Thanks for listening, and good luck.